In the desolate corners of the state of Texas, beneath the endless stretch of barren land, there lies a twisted tale that has plagued the very soul of the Lone Star State. A tale of unimaginable horrors, of blood and bone, of twisted minds, and a hunger so insatiable that it would leave a scar on history itself. This is the chilling story of the Hewitt family, a name that became synonymous with terror, brutality, and unthinkable savagery. From 1969 to 1973, they unleashed a reign of terror that would see 33 lives end in the most heinous of ways, stirring whispers of their atrocities in the quiet, unsuspecting towns of Texas. What drove this family to commit such horrific acts? And how did they transform into the living nightmare that hunted travelers along the desolate roads of the state? In the shadows of their story lies a dark, twisted philosophy, a perverse belief system, and a grotesque survival instinct that would drive them to cannibalism. But this story, shrouded in blood and madness, is more than just a tale of murder. It is the story of survival, a family bound not just by blood, but by a grim determination to endure at any cost. Scene 2, the origins of a dark legacy. The Hewitt family could have been any other family from rural Texas, living on the outskirts, working hard to carve out a living. They were once a simple family, content in their isolated world, earning their keep from the slaughterhouses of the region. Life was harsh, but it was a life they knew, however. The 1960s were a time of turmoil, not just for the nation, but for the very people living on the fringes, with the looming specter of the Vietnam War casting a shadow over every corner of America. The state of Texas found itself battered by economic decline. The once thriving industries, the very ones that had sustained the people, began to crumble under the weight of recession. The local slaughterhouse that had once provided the Hewitts with a modest income was forced to shut its doors. With it, the foundation of their world cracked open. Faced with financial ruin and an uncertain future, the Hewitts made a choice, one that would forever alter the course of their lives. Rather than leave their ancestral home, they chose to stay and adapt. But this decision, though seemingly rooted in pride, birthed something far darker. Without a steady income, without food, and without the means to survive in the harsh Texan wilderness, the family did what any desperate soul might do. They adapted, but it wasn't just survival that became their goal. It was the drive to reclaim their world through brutal means. Scene 3, a new philosophy emerges. The days grew longer and the nights colder. The Hewitt family fell into madness. It was not just the hunger that twisted their minds. It was the isolation, the desolation, and the primitive instincts that began to awaken within them. Once satisfied by the meat of cattle, they began to look for alternative sources of sustenance. The land that had once offered prosperity now turned into a hunting ground for something far more sinister. The journey into madness was slow at first, but as the months dragged on, the Hewitts' grip on their humanity began to slip. They became predators, their land now a hunting ground for anyone unfortunate enough to wander too close. No longer were they mere victims of circumstance. They became ruthless hunters, driven by an insatiable hunger that could never be satisfied. Their actions became not just a means of survival, but a grotesque necessity. And so, the killing began. Strangers on the road, travelers looking for rest in the desolate expanses of Texas, were lured into the grasp of the Hewitts, only to find themselves torn apart in a horrifying game of survival. The family, with their twisted version of morality, saw themselves as justified in their actions. To them, it was not murder, it was merely the price of living in a world that had abandoned them. Their victims were seen as expendable, unfortunate souls who had crossed into their territory, becoming the family's next meal. Scene 4. The unfolding terror. The first recorded murder by the Hewitts was nothing more than a fluke, an isolated incident. But as the days turned into weeks and then months, the killings became more frequent. And with each victim, the Hewitts grew bolder, more confident. No longer were they simple cannibals, they were predators, and the desolate roads of Texas became their hunting grounds. By 1973, the Hewitt family had become a full-blown nightmare. The authorities, already stretched thin by the increasing crime wave throughout the state, were powerless to stop them. The land of Travis County, once a peaceful and quiet expanse, had turned into a lawless wasteland where the Hewitts could do as they pleased. The few survivors who managed to escape the clutches of the Hewitt family spoke of a scene so grotesque, so horrific, that even the hardened detectives who investigated the crimes were shaken to their core. Scene 5. The Hewitt family's dark philosophy was not enough for the Hewitts to simply kill and eat their victims. No, their perversion ran deeper. They justified their actions with a twisted, self-serving philosophy, a belief that their survival was not just a matter of necessity, but of destiny. In their eyes, the world had abandoned them, leaving them to fend for themselves in a cruel, unforgiving wilderness. What they took from others was simply a means of payment for the neglect they had suffered. But there was one member of the Hewitt family whose actions would haunt the world forever. The one they called a monstrous figure whose physical deformities were mirrored by the darkness inside him. Leatherface became the most notorious of the family's members. His face, a grotesque mask of leather, became the symbol of terror. But Leatherface was not born this way. He was molded by the cruelty of his family, shaped by the horrors they had endured. As we delve deeper into the twisted history of the Hewitt family, we will explore the macabre details of their existence. From the dark undercurrents of the family's relationships to the blood-soaked murders that marked their name, the chilling story of the Hewitts is one that must be told. As we venture deeper into the twisted labyrinth of the Hewitt family story, we begin to peel back the layers of their depravity, revealing a grotesque and shocking reality. What began as a desperate attempt to survive in a cruel world soon became a terrifying legacy, one defined by bloodshed, mutilation, and madness. The members of the Hewitt family, each more deranged than the last, played their parts in a nightmarish opera of violence and horror. At the heart of this grotesque tale was Leatherface, or Thomas Brown Hewitt, a figure so horrifying that his very name strikes fear into the hearts of those familiar with the dark history of the family. Leatherface was not born a monster. He was shaped by a combination of neglect, violence, and the unrelenting cruelty of his family. The deformities that disfigured his face were not simply physical, they were psychological scars, the result of a broken family and a twisted upbringing that sought to make him an instrument of terror. But what truly makes Leatherface terrifying is not just his monstrous appearance, but his blind obedience to the family's brutal philosophy. Raised by the ruthless matriarch, Luda May Hewitt, Leatherface was manipulated, nurtured, and twisted into a living weapon. His face, a mask of human skin, became a symbol of his disfigurement, but also of his complete loss of humanity. He wore the mask not only to conceal his deformities, but to become a living embodiment of the violence that the Hewitts believed was their right to inflict on the world. Scene 7. The blood-stained history of the Hewitts. Understand the true nature of the Hewitt family, we must first look at the origin of their most heinous crimes, their first victims. In the early days of the Hewitt family's descent into madness, Their first acts of murder were fueled by a combination of desperation and hunger. It began with small acts of violent strangers who wandered too far off the beaten path. Unlucky souls who found themselves trapped in the remote corners of Texas. They were lured by the promise of safety, only to become the next meal for the cannibalistic family. But as time passed, the family's bloodlust grew insatiable. They began to capture, torment, and kill anyone who crossed their path. Travelers, hitchhikers, even entire families all were dragged into the dark heart of the Hewitt family's lair. Once captured, the victims were subjected to unimaginable horrors. Torture, mutilation, and cannibalism became routine. The family, led by Luda May, justified their actions with a sickening belief that they were doing what was necessary to survive, that their twisted acts of violence were nothing more than the price of life itself. The family did not simply kill their victims, they feasted on them. The matriarch, Luda May, who had once worked in the slaughterhouse, now used her culinary skills to prepare meals from the flesh of their prey. These meals, served with a side of perverse justification, became a symbol of the family's descent into madness. Every meal was a reminder of their twisted survival, a grotesque feast on the lives of others. Scene 8. The enigmatic family members. Each member of the Hewitt family played a role in this grotesque tableau of death, each one more disturbed than the last. While the actions of Leatherface and Luda May are the most notorious, there were others whose dark histories contributed to the horror that unfolded in Texas. There was the Till Lady, a woman of grotesque proportions whose role in the family was less overt but equally disturbing. She was a quiet presence in the background, a figure who seemed to know all too well what was happening but chose to remain complicit. In the movies, she was portrayed as a gentle, albeit disturbed, figure, but the comics painted a far darker picture. She was shown as a woman who took pleasure in the suffering of others, engaging in horrific acts of her own. Then there was Enriqueta Hewitt, a character obsessed with the idea of motherhood. Her twisted desire for children led her to engage in relationships with other members of the family, all in a desperate bid to create a child of her own. The comics further explored her perverse relationship with her brother and her obsession with nurturing the children of their victims as if they were her own, in a family already steeped in darkness. Her actions served as a chilling reminder of the destructive force of unchecked desire. And then there was the young boy, the innocent, or so it seemed, child of the Hewitt family. Seti, a child caught in the midst of a horrific family legacy. Though young Seti was a willing participant in the crimes, helping his family capture and torture their victims, yet there was an unsettling innocence to him, a sense of confusion and conflict that mirrored the twisted morality of his family. As he grew, so too did his sadistic tendencies. No longer a mere victim of his upbringing, he became an active participant in the horrors that the Hewitts wrought. Scene 9. The family's depravity. Unleashed at the heart of the Hewitt family's depravity was their twisted matriarch, Luda May. She was the driving force behind the family's gruesome philosophy. A woman who had known nothing but hardship, Luda May was a product of a society that had abandoned her. She viewed the world through a distorted lens, justifying every act of violence as a means of survival. In her eyes, the world was a hostile place, and only the strongest would survive. To her, the blood of their victims was not just nourishment, it was their birthright. Luda May's influence on the family was immense. She was the one who taught Leatherface to kill, to wear the skins of his victims, to become the monster he was destined to be. She was the one who gave him the mask, the very symbol of his transformation into something otherworldly. Under her command, Leatherface became not just a killer, but a symbol of the family's power, a grotesque enforcer of their reign of terror. Scene 10. The ultimate betrayal. The horrors of the Hewitt family were not confined to their remote home in the desolate Texan wilderness. They spread out, infecting the lives of anyone who ventured too close. The stories of their killings began to spread like wildfire, reaching the ears of local authorities who had long suspected that something was amiss. Yet, for all their efforts, the Hewitts eluded capture. Their home, a dilapidated house tucked away in the desolate corners of the county, was both their sanctuary and their prison. As the years passed, the family's madness became a legacy. The victims kept coming, and with each new life taken, the Hewitts grew bolder, more reckless in their pursuit of death. The once innocent faces of the children in the family became twisted with the blood of their victims, their innocence lost in the wake of their family's depravity. But, as all stories of evil go, there would eventually be a reckoning, a moment when the family's dark legacy would come to an end. How would it happen? Would it be at the hands of the law? Or would it be at the hands of the very people they had terrorized for so long? Scene 11. The end of the line. The horror that the Hewitts unleashed upon the world did not end with them. Their story lived on in the whispers of those who survived, in the tales of their monstrous acts passed down through generations. But as we close this chapter, we must ask, was there ever any hope for redemption? Could there ever be forgiveness for the blood they spilled? In the end, the Hewitts were not just a family, they were a symbol of the darkness that resides in the human soul. A reminder that when pushed to the brink, even the most ordinary people can be consumed by madness. The horrors they left behind would continue to haunt the roads of Texas, their story forever etched in the annals of American criminal history.